How does this always seem to happen to Argentina's opponents? At this point, it is honestly becoming difficult to ignore. Argentina secured its quarterfinal victory on Saturday night and booked another place in the World Cup semifinals, but once again, it was anything but straightforward. Once again, the match required extra time, and once again, it ended with another major controversy dominating the conversation. Now, many people firmly believe this was a completely fair victory with nothing suspicious about it. Perhaps they are right. But when you look at everything that has unfolded around Argentina throughout this tournament, match after match after match, it becomes genuinely difficult not to feel that something always seems to tilt in their favor, as though the outcome keeps being gently pushed in the same direction. So let me ask the question directly. How does this continue happening over and over again, always to the team standing across from Argentina? Is it really nothing more than an extraordinary series of unbelievable coincidences? Or is there someone, somewhere, making sure the final result keeps ending the same way? Let's break everything down because when you place every incident together, the overall picture becomes almost unbelievable. First, it is important to understand the situation Argentina found itself in because the defending champions certainly did not cruise through this match. This now marks 3 consecutive knockout games in which Argentina has flirted with elimination before somehow surviving. They needed extra time and an own goal in the 111th minute to escape Cape Verde. They required a remarkable comeback after trailing by 2 goals against Egypt. Then, here in Kansas City, inside Arrowhead Stadium, in front of 69,045 spectators on a hot and humid Missouri evening, they found themselves in serious trouble all over again. The match began positively enough. Less than 10 minutes into the game, Lionel Messi curled in a corner kick, and Alexis Mac Allister guided a perfectly placed header into the far corner of the net. That assist became Messi's 10th career World Cup assist. Here is an incredible piece of football trivia. Every one of those 10 assists has been finished by a different teammate, stretching all the way back to the 2006 World Cup. Argentina led 1-0, and everything appeared to be unfolding exactly according to plan. But that comfortable feeling disappeared quickly because Argentina failed to build on its early advantage, while Switzerland refused to back down and instead seized complete control of the contest. Murat Yakin's side dominated possession, attacked with confidence, and by the second half was creating opportunity after opportunity. The statistics paint the picture clearly. Before the decisive turning point, Switzerland had recorded 18 touches inside Argentina's penalty area compared to Argentina's 44, while steadily increasing the pressure throughout the match. The defending champions were being thoroughly challenged, and eventually that pressure produced its reward in the 67th minute when Dan Doy squeezed a shot from a tight angle underneath Emiliano Martinez to make it 1-1. Switzerland suddenly had all the momentum. They had the energy, the confidence, and the belief that an upset was within reach. An Argentina elimination no longer seemed unlikely. In fact, it looked increasingly realistic. Murat Yakin was already preparing to introduce fresh attacking players in search of a winning goal. At that stage, the match belonged to Switzerland. Then came the incident that completely changed everything. Just 5 minutes after the equalizer, Argentina's Leandro Paredes challenged Briel Embolo, and referee João Pinheiro reached into his pocket before showing Paredes a yellow card. At first glance, it looked like a routine booking. But then the video assistant referee team inside the broadcast center in Dallas reviewed the incident more closely. The replay angles appeared to suggest something unusual. There seemed to be little or perhaps no meaningful contact at all. Instead, it looked as though Embolo had already gone to ground before Paredes actually reached him. Put simply, the replay raised the possibility that Embolo had simulated the foul. The VAR officials therefore advised the referee to review the incident at the monitor. This is where events became especially unusual. Officially, the review was not listed as an investigation into simulation. Instead, it was categorized as mistaken identity, with the explanation that the wrong player had initially received the yellow card. After reviewing the footage, Pinheiro withdrew the booking shown to Paredes and instead issued the yellow card to Embolo. That decision carried enormous consequences because Embolo had already been cautioned during the first half, ironically after committing a foul against that same Leandro Paredes. The second yellow immediately became a red card. Embolo collapsed in disbelief, burying his face in his hands as tears streamed down his face while teammates attempted to comfort him. At that very moment, Switzerland's World Cup dream walked off the pitch alongside one of its most important players. Only minutes earlier, Switzerland had looked like the stronger side with every reason to believe victory was within reach. Now they were forced to continue the remainder of normal time and the entirety of extra time with only 10 players. Here is the remarkable statistic that makes the moment even more extraordinary. Receiving a second yellow card for simulation and being sent off specifically for diving at a World Cup is incredibly rare. It has happened only 4 times across the last 60 years of World Cup history. Embolo now joins an exceptionally short list that includes Mexico's Luis Perez, Ghana's Asamoah Gyan, and Italy's Francesco Totti. In 6 decades of World Cup football, only 4 players have ever experienced that exact fate. Think about how many dives you witness during a single football match, let alone across an entire World Cup tournament. Players throw themselves to the ground dramatically countless times every game, and almost never does it result in a sending-off. Yet here, during a quarterfinal with Argentina under enormous pressure, the video assistant referee stepped in and produced one of the rarest red cards ever seen in the history of the World Cup. You have to admit, the timing alone is extraordinary. The process that led to the decision is almost unbelievably complicated. Here is the irony that genuinely raises eyebrows. According to the laws of the game, the alleged dive itself could not have been reviewed independently. VAR is not permitted to simply identify a dive far away from goal and intervene on its own initiative. The only reason the entire sequence became reviewable was because referee João Pinheiro initially showed a yellow card to Leandro Paredes. That original booking, which was ultimately judged to have been issued to the wrong player, activated the mistaken identity protocol and created the opportunity for VAR to become involved before transferring the caution to Breel Embolo instead. In other words, a refereeing mistake involving the wrong player became the very mechanism that allowed the video review to send off Argentina's opponent. Read that carefully because it is an unusual chain of events. Had the referee simply waved play on, as many observers believed he should have done, none of what followed would have been possible. It required an initial error to trigger the review, and the consequences completely transformed the match. This was not a minor decision that slightly influenced the flow of the game. It completely altered its direction. Before the dismissal, Switzerland controlled 54% of possession and looked like the more threatening side. After the red card, Argentina dominated with 76% of the ball. From that point onward, Argentina registered 17 shots while Switzerland managed only 2. The expected goals during the closing stages stood at 1.61 for Argentina compared to a tiny 0.03 for Switzerland. Murat Yakin's entire tactical approach, the one that had left Argentina struggling, disappeared in a single moment after a referee stood in front of a monitor. Eventually, deep into extra time, Julian Alvarez, who had gone the entire tournament without scoring until then, curled a magnificent strike into the top corner from outside the penalty area in the 112th minute. Lautaro Martinez then added a breakaway goal in the closing moments to seal a 3-1 victory and send Argentina into the semi-finals. Even so, very few people genuinely believe the contest unfolds in exactly the same way had both teams remained with 11 players on the field. Switzerland's frustration was completely understandable. Midfielder Remo Freuler described the situation simply as a disaster. Captain Granit Xhaka, a player with vast international experience, insisted Switzerland had been the superior team and argued that the red card completely changed the complexion of the match. Their disappointment was impossible to miss. That frustration also reflects a much larger issue surrounding this entire tournament, one that extends far beyond Argentina alone. VAR has endured a deeply controversial World Cup. It has generated major debates in almost every knockout round, and the criticism keeps returning to the same central point. It is not necessarily that the technology consistently produces incorrect. Looking purely at the facts of the decision itself, Argentina were not unfairly favored, and Switzerland, painful as that conclusion may be for their supporters, cannot accurately claim they were completely robbed either because the replay strongly suggests that Embolo did simulate the challenge. That point is genuinely difficult to dismiss. Furthermore, the mistaken identity protocol introduced for this World Cup does allow VAR to intervene whenever the wrong player from either team receives a disciplinary card. Therefore, judged strictly according to the written laws of the game, João Pinheiro ultimately reached the correct decision. Simulation remains a form of cheating. Diving is against the rules. A player who intentionally throws himself to the ground in an attempt to deceive the referee technically accepts the risk of receiving the punishment that follows. Perhaps the most revealing detail of all is that even Switzerland's own coach, Murat Yakin, despite his obvious frustration, stopped short of suggesting any conspiracy. When questioned afterward, he blamed an unfortunate rule and an officiating mistake rather than claiming the match had been manipulated, and that distinction matters. It reflected the words of someone determined to remain fair rather than reaching for the easiest accusation, and that perspective deserves to be remembered alongside all of the outrage. Yet this is where the discussion becomes truly uncomfortable because the biggest issue has never really been whether this individual decision was technically correct. The real issue, according to many critics, is not a single decision but the pattern, and that pattern is becoming increasingly difficult for people to ignore. Think about how VAR has operated throughout this tournament. When many believed it should have intervened, it remained silent. When Egypt desperately appealed for a penalty during stoppage time against Argentina, VAR did not step in and allowed play to continue. Yet on other occasions, when many felt it should have stayed out of the action, it became heavily involved over the smallest details. It went back 17 seconds and almost the entire length of the pitch to disallow what looked like a brilliant Egyptian goal against Argentina. Now it has intervened over a dive near the touchline, far from the goal and offering no immediate scoring opportunity, resulting in Argentina's opponent being sent off during a World Cup quarterfinal. To many observers, when VAR is expected to speak, it remains silent. When it is expected to stay quiet, it suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. And somehow, match after match, the team appearing to benefit from those inconsistencies continues to wear the same sky blue and white stripes. That alone is why the debate refuses to disappear. At the same time, it is important not to claim certainty where none exists. None of these incidents, taken individually, proves any deliberate wrongdoing, and anyone insisting otherwise is presenting speculation as fact. Even so, many argue that it is difficult to overlook the repeated sequence of controversial moments. Looking back across Argentina's tournament, supporters point to Lionel Messi escaping punishment after a studs-up challenge on Algeria's captain that did not result in any card. They point to the match against Egypt, where a goal was ruled out, a penalty appeal was rejected, and the aftermath included a formal complaint accusing FIFA of protecting Argentina. Others remember the disputed fouls that were not called during the Cape Verde match. Some even reach back to the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, where Argentina received a tournament record 5 penalties while a controversial Messi handball against the Netherlands went unpunished. Critics argue that every one of those incidents ultimately favored Argentina. Whether that conclusion is justified or not, it explains why many supporters believe the pattern has become too consistent to dismiss as simple coincidence. Eventually, they argue, a long enough sequence of fortunate moments begins to feel less like random luck and more like a coin that somehow keeps landing on the same side. And in almost every case, it is either a referee's whistle or a VAR monitor playing the decisive role. That does not automatically mean Embolo's red card was some undeniable smoking gun or evidence of deliberate manipulation inside a control room. Rather, critics see it as another entry added to an already lengthy list of controversial moments, arriving during the very tournament in which FIFA has already faced repeated questions about its credibility. When an organization spends a World Cup surrounded by disputes over disciplinary decisions, formal complaints, and controversial officiating appointments, many believe it inevitably loses the benefit of the doubt, even when later decisions are technically correct. That may be the greatest consequence of this tournament. Even decisions that fully comply with the laws of the game are immediately viewed with suspicion because so many supporters have already lost confidence in the institution responsible for making them. In that sense, the damage extends beyond any single match. FIFA has not simply faced criticism over individual calls. Many believe it has created an atmosphere where millions of people now instinctively expect the worst before the replay has even finished. Yet there is another side to this story that makes the entire narrative surrounding Argentina far more complicated. Despite every accusation of favorable officiating, this Argentina team has hardly looked unstoppable. In fact, it has appeared surprisingly vulnerable throughout the knockout rounds. Lionel Messi failed to score for the first time in 10 consecutive World Cup matches, bringing an extraordinary streak to an end. For the first time in this tournament, one of his own teammates arguably outshone him. Messi remained relatively quiet, managing only 3 shots while visibly showing the effects of an exhausting schedule after playing extra time against Cape Verde, a full 90 minutes against Egypt, and another demanding 120 minutes here within only 8 days. Considering he is now 39 years old, expecting him to carry Argentina through every knockout match almost single-handedly is an enormous demand. This time, another player stepped into the spotlight. Julian Alvarez, who had not scored throughout the tournament until this match, chose the biggest possible stage to produce one of the finest goals of the competition, curling a spectacular 24-yard strike into the top corner. More than anything else, that goal demonstrated that Lionel Scaloni has quietly assembled a squad capable of winning even without constant moments of Messi brilliance, relying instead on Alexis Mac Allister, Julian Alvarez, and Lautaro Martinez to provide the decisive contributions. That depth may prove essential because Argentina's defense has started to show clear signs of vulnerability, conceding 5 goals across its last 3 matches, with Lisandro Martinez openly admitting afterward that the team needs to improve its concentration. The overall picture, therefore, remains unusually complex. On one hand, many supporters believe Argentina has consistently benefited from controversial officiating decisions. On the other hand, the team itself continues to struggle through every knockout round by the narrowest of margins. Both realities can exist at the same time, and that combination is precisely why Argentina's World Cup journey has become one of the most debated stories of the entire tournament. So where does everything stand now? Argentina advances to a blockbuster semi-final against old rivals England and Atlanta on Wednesday, with Messi moving one step closer to another opportunity to extend his all-time World Cup scoring record, which currently stands at 21 goals. Even before kickoff, the tension surrounding that match is already building. If the officiating has been intensely scrutinized up to this point, the spotlight will become even brighter once Argentina faces an England side that also required extra time to overcome Norway. Every whistle, every challenge, and every VAR review will almost certainly be analyzed frame by a worldwide audience already prepared to question any close decision that favors the defending champions. Whoever FIFA appoints to referee that semi-final will step into perhaps the most heavily scrutinized assignment of the entire tournament. Switzerland, meanwhile, returns home heartbroken, convinced that a newly introduced rule many fans barely understood, combined with a review taking place inside a broadcast center in Dallas, cost them a place among the Final Four despite believing they had been in control of the match. FIFA, once again, finds itself confronting another furious opponent, another wave of criticism, and another global audience increasingly unwilling to extend the organization the benefit of the doubt. Regardless of whether anyone believes the conspiracy theories surrounding the tournament, FIFA's reputation has now become one of its biggest storylines, built piece by piece throughout the summer. Argentina continues to survive every challenge, and somehow, almost every time it does, a referee or a VAR monitor ends up becoming part of the conversation. So what do you think? Has Argentina genuinely received significant help throughout this World Cup, or are football fans simply seeing patterns because trust in FIFA has already been badly damaged? It is a debate with compelling arguments on both sides. Share your thoughts below, and stay tuned because Wednesday's semi-final between Argentina and England promises to be one of the biggest spectacles of the entire tournament.